welcome to session 6, part 1, Understanding the Counseling Process. What I've decided to do here is present to you a kind of a flow chart or a template of how you can visualize the counseling process in your mind's eye. And the way I've done this is in the form of 3 circles that represent 3 phases of the counseling process from beginning to end. And so this is something you can utilize in any type of counseling relationship, even counseling a friend or a family member. So the 3 circles represent, the first one represents getting the story, the second, exploring the internal world, and then the third is intervention, or how you might intervene with that particular person. So what we're going to do is go through those one at a time. So let's start with getting the story. We are people that live our lives in stories, and what we want to do when we're listening to somebody is we want to hear their story, and we want to hear it fully. Sometimes what happens is a person comes to a counselor and they only tell half their story, and the counselor starts to intervene with advice or questions or some sort of guidance. But it's very important to be a very good listener. And if you're going to ask questions, make sure you ask clarifying questions that will cause the person, the counselee, to elaborate on whatever their story is. I was trained as a journalist in my early college career, and some questions that we would usually ask somebody if we were trying to get a story were questions like who, what, where, when, why, and how. So those are good questions to ask a counselee when you're trying to get a hold of what their story is. So what you want to do as you're listening is ask yourself the question, do I know the story of this particular client? And if you feel that you know their story, then you can move on to the next circle. If you don't, then just ask more questions to try and get the full story. So let's assume that you have the story. You know what their conflict is or their problem. You know what's bothering them. Maybe where they're not sure about a particular decision. You have the history of that. You have the context of that. Now you're going to move to the next circle, which is exploring the internal world. And this is where you're going to do the most work, and this is where people just in natural conversation tend to do the least amount of work. So the first aspect of exploring the internal world that I put here on this chart is to look at the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs, and the desires of the counselee that you're working with. So what are they thinking about a particular issue that they present to you? What are their thoughts about that issue? For instance, if they present to you an issue where they have an internal conflict, you know, I have a complaint about a friend of mine, and I'm not sure whether I should confront them with that complaint. And so you just say, well, what are your thoughts about complaining to them? What do you think about that? The next is feelings. How do you feel about that? You know, when this particular situation happens that bothers you, how do you feel? Do you feel, you know, annoyed, irritated? Do you feel hurt? Do you feel sad? Do you feel ashamed, guilty? So try and help your client to find feeling words that match, you know, the internal experience of feeling that they're having when something is happening to them. And this is a difficult task for a lot of people. A lot of times what people will say here is, I feel like ... or I feel that ... And what follows is more of a thought or a belief rather than a feeling. You know, I feel that, you know, he will punish me if I complain about this. Well, that's really a belief. The belief is, I will be punished if I complain about what's bothering me. That's not a feeling. So what you could say to them is, okay, it sounds like you have the belief that if you confront your friend on your complaint, you will be punished somehow. How does that feel for you when you think about that particular belief? Or how would that feel for you to confront him when you are anticipating a punitive response back? So, so you have to push a little bit with most people to get feeling words, but it's very important to help the counselee attend to and identify and articulate what they're feeling. And another important point about feelings here is you want your client to attend to what they feel. You want to understand what they feel, but you want to encourage a non-judgmental um, a non-judgmental validation of their feelings. In other words, attend to the feelings, but don't judge the feelings. Don't judge the feelings as, oh, that's a good feeling, or that's a bad feeling, or that's a feeling you should not have. Instead, just it is what it is. So whatever they're feeling is okay. It's valid. It matters. And some people that you counsel will minimize their feelings. They will treat them as unimportant, or they will react very harshly toward themselves for what they feel like. Oh my goodness, I should not be feeling this, but I do. And what you want to encourage as a counselor is a non-judgmental stance toward the feelings that they have. So that's the world of feelings. And then, as I mentioned earlier, your counselees are generally going to have beliefs. So they're going to have beliefs about themselves, beliefs about other people that they relate to, and beliefs about the world around them. And for instance, somebody who's more on the depressed side is going to be having a belief about themselves that I don't matter, I'm not worthy, I can't possibly achieve this, I'm inadequate. Those are the kinds of beliefs that you'll tend to see with someone who's depressed. If somebody is anxious, you'll see beliefs like, um, I'm worried about the future, I'm afraid that bad things are going to happen, uh, I'm anxious about whether I'm making the right decision, and they'll ask you a lot of questions. Is this right or is that right? So there's certain types of beliefs that tend to underline certain types of feeling states. Anger, for instance, will oftentimes have beliefs underneath the anger, such as people are out to get me, people don't like me, I'm being treated unfairly. Um, Everybody's blaming me, this is not just, and maybe even beliefs about God, that God is not there for me, He doesn't care about me. And that could be with a depressed person, an anxious person, or an angry person, that they could have these mistaken beliefs about God. And so you listen to what their mistaken beliefs are, what all their beliefs are, but you might particularly want to hone in on what beliefs they have that are really not true. They're really mistaken beliefs. Um, and then lastly, you want to look at their desires. You know, what are their goals? What are their aspirations? What do they want to achieve? Uh, what what are they? What do they infer as their purpose uh, in life, and what gives them a sense of meaning in life? Uh, where do they feel that God is calling them? And these kinds of questions are very important because we know that God has created us for a purpose. Each and every one of us are unique. We have unique gifts um, and unique callings um, that are probably going to be related to that giftedness. And people are often misled that they think they need to pursue money or happiness, and that's very elusive. But when people pursue meaning and purpose and calling, that's when they're going to begin to feel that peace that God provides that surpasses all understanding. And that peace is very, very much an antidote to anxiety, depression, anger, despair. So, so you want to look at their desires. Some good questions to ask are, how does that affect you? What does this mean to you? And what are your thoughts and feelings about that? Or what do you believe about that? What do you desire to achieve? A great question is, what is God calling you to? If he was here right now, what would he be saying to you? So those are some things we look at. The second aspect of the internal world is internal conflict. Many times somebody will come to you with an issue or problem. They will have an internal conflict that inside their mind, there's a part of them that wants to go left and a part of them that wants to go right. And they are kind of frozen in the middle. They're at a fork in the road and they're not sure which way to go. This is very typical. And what you don't want to do is say to that person, oh, go right or go left. Because, or you don't even want to ask them, do you want to go right or do you want to go left? Because the truth is they're conflicted. The truth is there is a part of them that wants to go right and a part that wants to go left. And so the best thing you can do is explore and expand on and get them to elaborate on whatever their internal conflict is. And I've got some ways of kind of getting a handle on that internal conflict, and I've listed them here. The first one is to look and see if maybe your client or your counselee has a wish versus a fear. So many times conflicts can be seen in this way, that they have a wish. I want to confront this person on this complaint that I have, but I have a fear. I'm afraid they're going to retaliate. And so I'm conflicted about whether to confront them or not, because I want to, because I want to get this off my chest, but I don't want to because I'm afraid of the retaliation that I don't want to experience. So that's a classic wish versus fear conflict. A more general type of conflict would just simply be a part versus a part. You know, there's a part of me that wants to go to a missions trip this summer, but there's another part of me that wants to take a summer school class. And both are good options, but they're conflicted as to which one they want to choose. So there's a part that, yeah, would love to do missionary work and do some volunteer work and get that experience. But there's a part that would like to maybe get a little bit ahead in school, take a class so that the school year is not as hard. And they have arguments on each side. And then the last way to kind of label an internal conflict is in the language of parent, adult, child. And that's the PAC here, P for parent, A for adult, C for child. And this is very analogous to Freud's notion of the id, ego, and superego. So the id would be like the child, the ego like the adult, and the superego like the parent. And so what you'll see oftentimes in an internal conflict is there's a child part of the self that wants to pursue pleasure and maximize pleasure and minimize pain. There's a parent part of the self that says, do the right thing. This is what you ought to do. This is what you should do. And then there's an adult part that says, okay, given the demands of reality, let's compromise. So if the child wants to go on a missions trip for the whole summer and the parent says that's not being responsible, the responsible thing that you should do is go to summer school all summer. The adult might say, well, you know, realistically, you do need to work somewhat during the summer. So to be away on a missions trip for the entire summer will really hurt you financially. But it is a good opportunity. So why don't you go on a short-term missions trip and for 2 to 4 weeks, and then instead of taking 3 summer school classes, just take 1 or 2, and then work and make some money. So the adult's looking at the reality of your financial situation It's paying attention to what the parent is saying about being responsible with school, but it's also paying attention to what the child is saying, which is, I want to travel, I want to go away, I want to pursue mission work. And it compromises, it looks for a compromise solution. So what you're trying to do is enhance the adult part and maybe shrink the parent circle or shrink the child circle depending on the client or the counselee. Some counselees will have very large parents, small child, some very large child, a small parent. So it just kind of depends on the person. So once you find the internal conflict, you discover it in talking to your counselee. The next very important step is to give equal airtime to each side of the conflict. So what we mean by this is, tell me all about one part, now tell me all about the other part. So for instance, if it's a wish versus a fear around confronting somebody with a complaint, tell me all about the part of you that wants to complain to your friend about, you know, how they are leaving dirty dishes in the sink. And then they'll tell you, and then you kind of summarize it, and then you say, is there anything else that that part is saying? And a lot of times when you ask them that question, is there anything else, they will have more to say. And then you say, tell me about all the part of you that's afraid to complain about this issue. And they'll tell you, and you listen carefully, and then you say, is there anything else? And again, they may have some more. Once you get both sides elaborated upon, then just summarize what you understand the internal conflict to be. So an example of a summary statement would be, well, it sounds to me that on the one hand, you want to confront your roommate on the dirty dishes because you're getting very irritated and very frustrated about it, and it's continuing to happen, and it's something that is very a big issue for you because you feel that you can't even think straight when your apartment is messy, and and on the other hand, you're worried that your roommate may think you're making a big deal out of nothing, and your roommate may feel offended or criticized by this and may not want to hang out with you as much socially or invite you to do things with him as much. And the fear is that you're going to weaken the friendship if you point out this particular issue that's bothering you. Am I kind of getting that right? That would be an example of a summary statement. And so you can do a summary statement whether it's a wish versus a fear, a part versus a part, or the parent, adult, child. All right, so we're gonna stop there for part one, and then in part two we'll continue on with the insight triangle and the intervention.